This afternoon, I want to welcome into the room Dr. Busisiwe Twala, a scientist by training, graduated from Rhodes University in 2020, also in the field of biochemistry. Her desires and passion is for wanting to help others. And after being dealt with her own experiences and challenges with mental health during her postgraduate studies, led her to volunteering at SADAG in 2017. She became a dedicated counselor in 2018 with the organization, and in 2019 took up the position as the call center manager. Currently, she's the projects manager at SADAG. Busi keeps mentally healthy by running a lot, venting to her husband, and leaning on her a supportive family and friends. She also said that during COVID, we had a little chat earlier, that during COVID, she's spending a lot of time on the couch, exercising with lots of chips and binge watching.
Selwyn, you are exposing my secrets now.
Busisiwe, welcome, and really, really glad to have you in the room today to share with us around the work that SADAG does, but also to share with us some of the learnings that we can take from the involvement that you and others are experiencing right around this country at the moment. Welcome, and it's a real honor to have you in the room today. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Selwyn. And, it's such an honor and a privilege, to be working where I'm working currently as a scientist. And it's always, humbling for me to be invited to speak about what I've learned and what I've noticed through my journey, through SADAG. And it's always beautiful when, I hear people saying they want to learn more, because there's so much stigma around mental health and a lot of issues around people, getting help in mental health. So it's such a beautiful space to be in, and I'm honored. And thank you to everybody who's, taken their time this afternoon to come and engage in this important conversation. So I am going to start sharing my screen so I can start with the formalities and presentation. So yes, as the host for today has indicated, we are talking about such an important topic, teen mental health, where we are focusing on teen suicide prevention. So I just want to start off with a background and, who SADAG is, where we are coming from, what the organization is about. So SADAG was founded in 1995 to help patients with depressive and anxiety disorders. So our key function at SADAG is that we run a call center which provides telephonic counseling, informations, and referrals nationwide. And we run the only suicide crisis helpline in the country. Currently, we have about 25 plus helplines, that deal with various issues. As much as we know we focus on mental health issues, we get a lot of calls about psychosocial issues. And I remember when COVID started, we literally had to rearrange our referrals and information to provide information, even about COVID, where to find help, where to, get tested. So, because most of our lines are toll-free, so people, remember our lines and reach out to us for any information. So we are open 7 days a week, 365 days a year. And, we do provide information materials to schools, to workplaces, we in the form of brochures, pamphlet, posters, and our website has a lot of online information regarding mental health and various issues. And one of my passion projects that made me, join SADAG was seeing that they do school outreach programs. So pre-COVID, we would go into schools when invited, go class by class, speaking to the learners, what are they going through, what are the issues. and how to recognize symptoms within themselves, and also, get help, for even their friends or themselves. And also, we wouldn't exclude, their parents and teachers as well, because it talks that we would also provide to them face-to-face, where we also give them tips and tools on how to deal with learners that they face day to day, and they're coming across with mental health issues. We also do corporate wellness events, and we've done a lot of rural community projects, and we also conduct, support groups. So basically, support groups are support structures where they are run by patients for patients. So just to kick off, mental health is a big issue across worldwide. We know that the World Health Organization indicates that, depression is a leading cause to disability for adults. And one of the biggest thing is that, mental health is always looking at and targeting at adults. And we know that 1 in 3 South Africans will do or suffer from a mental health issue at some point in their life. 75% of people who have attempted suicide have undiagnosed depression. And depression is the leading cause, of mental health issues. And only 25% of people in South Africa will have, mental illness excess, where they are able to get treatment or help, leaving a whole 75% of people, living with mental health issues not getting proper treatment. And this speaks very much to the work that SADC does. We are there to bring the information and even provide people with information, tips and tools to even help themselves when they are not able to access, various treatments accordingly. So, every 24 hours in South Africa, there are 23 suicides, with over 460 suicide attempts occurring. And these are quite old stats, I think, because these are pre-COVID stats. And I think, if these stats were to be updated and looked into, I think the numbers could be quite higher. And we know that males are 4 times likely to die by suicide compared to females. And this is because, males take extreme measures, when they have decided that they no longer want to live. And this is why that they are 4 times more likely to die by suicide. And we find that the most at-risk age group for suicide is adolescents, which is, the important part of today's conversation. And we find that 9.5% of all teen deaths are due to suicide, which is a very scary number. And so, as much as depression and all other mental issues, we are always looking into adults. So it is high time that, we highlight this issue around teens. The youngest suicide, as scary as it is, the reported case in South Africa is a 6-year-old. So, as understanding teen depression helps us understand, their mood changes. And, the rate of level of teen depression or child depression is increasing. And we can see, as some of, today's participants have indicated, that, they are seeing cases within the schools and there's not enough help. So I think at times it's an issue of we don't know how to recognize the symptoms or identify them or even assist the kids. There's a perception that depression is an adult disease. Therefore, we miss the signs and symptoms amongst the kids. So what are the common symptoms that, they are seen amongst children? So for the younger kids, you find that they start not caring about anything. And you find that the younger kids who loved going to school, loved engaging with their friends, no longer want to do any of that. They no longer, they start having behavioral problems where they start acting out. I had one of the participants indicating that, what is the cause of bullying? Some of them are acting out from what they are feeling and they start, bullying others as well. There's an issue of eating disorders. Once you notice that a child starts overeating or not eating at all, it could be an issue that they are showing signs and symptoms of being depressive. And I think one of the biggest issues that, you know, parents who've raised little kids have noticed that whenever they don't want to do anything, there'll be issues of they're forever sick, you know, stomach issues, nausea or headaches. And if these happen, you know, unexplainably and a lot, it could be a sign that a child is facing certain issues that could be affecting their mental health. Constant weeping and irritability is another symptom, you know, being aggressive or moody. You know, as I'm talking about these symptoms, if any of you, you know, within the participants, because this is not an exhaustive list. So if you have, you know, symptoms that you are aware of or that you are thinking of or that you have noticed before in other kids, please put it in the chat box, you know, so that we are able to teach others as well what to look out for and what signs and symptoms that they should be aware of when it comes to identifying these issues in kids. So the important subject of today, you know, the adolescents, the teens, and what does it look like in them, depression? I'm touching on depression more because, you know, it is the leading cause of suicide. Most people who do attempt or do actually, you know, take their own lives, it is because, you know, they are going through depressive symptoms. And we know that, you know, most adults who are diagnosed with depression, most of them, when I was still a counselor on the line, when I would chat to them, they would indicate, you know, you start asking questions like, when did you start feeling like this? And they would indicate that it started from, you know, when I was a teen, when I was in high school, I just didn't know what I was going through. I thought that it was a phase that would pass. And whenever I tried to voice it out, you know, the adults started telling me that, you know, it's a phase, I'm just being a teenager, I'm being moody. But when they come to the realization, once they come to knowing and understanding the signs and symptoms, they realize that they could have been carrying this from their teen years. So depression is more common in adolescents than the younger children. And symptoms are similar to those seen in adults, you know, in adolescents. But the most common ones that are quite noticeable are the following. You know, there'll be that social withdrawal, they start isolating. We know that teens like fitting in, and suddenly the teen doesn't want to be part of anything, don't want to be involved in anything, just want to isolate themselves. And knowing how the kid is prior to starting all these is also an indication that you see that they are starting to isolate. It could be an issue that they are going through something. You know, there's a sense of increased sleep where they just don't want to face the world. And it's another form of isolation. They are forever tired, fatigued, and don't want to get up or do anything. And you find that they are sleeping throughout the day. And then at night, there's a sense of lack of sleep where they are starting to be insomniac. They are constantly on their phones. It's because during the day, they just want to sleep, avoid everybody. And then at night, suddenly they are not sleeping. There's the change in eating habits, which I think, you know, we all at some point become emotional eaters or not wanting to eat when we are going through something difficult. So this is one of another common symptom to look out for, the overeating or not eating at all. And then, you know, there are kids who are, you know, quite they are very particular about their schoolwork. They care about the schoolwork. And you find suddenly that there's a drop in school performance, you know, that high performing student, and then suddenly they are no longer caring about the work. They start bunking, and it's a matter of, you know what, it doesn't matter whether I go to school or not. And you find that they start behaving disorderly, you know, conduct disorder for a child who was never back chatting, and they suddenly start back chatting to adults, or it's a person who doesn't want to follow the rules at school. And so these are indicators somehow that, you know what, the child is going through something and it's voicing out that I'm not okay. And these are the signs and symptoms that we need to look out for. There's a lot of risk-taking behavior. The drugs and alcohol. You know, as much as we know that teens are very experimental, there are people who want to try out things. Yes, I see my parents drinking, I do this and that, but also there's peer pressure amongst themselves. Like, hey, you know, you can smoke weed to stop being stressed or reduce the stress. So, and some of them take it to another level, because now that they understand that they are stressed, they are feeling down there, and now that drugs are a form of a gateway, and not understanding how this can impact, their brain functionality and, how they process their emotions, it makes, the issue much more worse. And you find that, there's decreased attention to personal appearance. And we know teenagers like looking good, and they are at a point where they start noticing, whether a boy or girl likes them. So they always want to appear, well groomed, well taken care of. And then suddenly the teen doesn't care whether they've taken a bath or not. So that is another indicator to look out for. One of the, the biggest issues is self-harm. And it's one of the issues that I've come across when doing, school talks with kids. And when you start engaging with them, asking them, how are they coping with the emotions that they don't get to address with the adults, that they don't get to speak to with the adults? And they start talking about self-harm. And it's something that is quite hidden that they do. And because self-harm is a way of them letting out their emotions, because they tell you that, I'm feeling this thing, nobody can see it. I cannot see it. I cannot understand it. So if I am feeling pain or I am seeing blood, it's a way that I can understand that I am going through something. So, and usually when they perform self-harm, it will be in areas that are quite hidden. You find that they do it on the inner parts of their arms, where, clothes will cover, be it summer or winter, and, in between their thighs. So it's something that is very difficult, usually for people to pick it up. And usually parents discover it by accident in most times. That's when we get calls to say, I don't know what's going on with my child. But usually it is a cry for help that they are going through something. And they are constantly always thinking and talking about death, and it is indicated that, people who do attempt suicide or, carry on as suicide is because, they've mentioned it, they highlight to somebody. Over 90% of cases, somebody will mention something to someone, they'll start speaking about death, not wanting to be around anymore. And, they'll start making plans on how to give away their possessions. And we know how much possessive they are with regards to their items and prized possessions. And obviously the big one, the suicide attempts. You find that a number of kids who, attempt suicide, it is because of underlying mental health issues. I don't know if you guys have noticed any other, symptoms that you'd like to put up in the chat box, and so that, we unpack them more and more, so that it's not only my list that we look at, because I know the session is recorded, and, the people can always go back and refer and see whether am I seeing what I'm seeing, or is it something that was not said, because I understand that there's also professionals in this space of mental health that are in the room. So, if you can unpack those as well in the chat, that would be so lovely. So just to, continue onwards with regards to what are the triggers? So what gets them into these dark spaces that now suddenly they are feeling depressed or they don't want to live anymore? So, there's family dynamics, their environment where they come from is a big influencer. And I think even for adults, it's pretty much the same. So you're coming in a family where, there's always bickering, there's always arguments, and you are always shouted at. Obviously, the child is going to feel like they don't matter. Nobody loves them. And, one of the things that I loved is reiterating to the kids to at least get a sense of understanding that, parents also go through difficult times. But as much it is a responsibility for the parents to be quite more aware of what's going on with the child rather than throwing everything at the child. So that they can handle and figure it out. it is very important, that the kids know that they matter in as much as everything that is happening within the family dynamics. There's issues of divorce and separation, and it is very difficult, for kids to take and internalize that suddenly there's two people that I had together, mom and dad, they're always going to be together, and now suddenly they are no longer together. And also the issues of who do I take after, who do I live with? So those are, things that, affect them mentally a lot, that it also triggers them to either get into depression or feeling suicidal. Economic stress in the family. COVID-19 has impacted so many families. And I think we are very aware that, many breadwinners lost their jobs, and that stress, a child having to adjust and understand that, I cannot be given this, I cannot get this, and sometimes kids are not spoken to about these issues, and parents want to protect the child, try to hide everything. But you can see the tension within the house, that now there's not enough money to go around, or there's no money at all. So, you find that, kids feel guilty that at least if I'm not around, I'm less of a burden to my parents. I used to have conversations with kids like, my mother is so stressed about, putting me through a good school. It's all she cares about. She doesn't even speak to me. And the only thing that the child was hearing was that I'm causing economic issues in the house. There's trauma. We live in a highly violent country, and from robberies, break-ins into the house, there's high rape cases, and adolescents are usually the people who do suffer from these as well. So trauma plays a big impact. So imagine you as an adult going through trauma and trying to figure out everything, taking you so much time. Just imagine how much for a person who's still developing, still trying to process their emotions, still trying to understand how do I deal with anything, how much more it can take for them to feel the way, that they'd feel mentally. The issue of bullying, at schools, social media has made this much more worse. And understanding bullying, and usually some of the bullies are people who actually need help more than anything. And unfortunately, for those ones who are at the receiving end, they don't understand that at times. And obviously, it will put them in a mental space where they feel, I shouldn't be at that school. I shouldn't be around people. Nobody likes me. They're constantly isolated, laughed at. And yeah, it's something that is one of the biggest issues. I know we've had workshops on bullying for schools. So, this is also a topic on its own that needs to be unpacked and indicated. How do you deal with a child who's a bully? How do you attend to the child who's being bullied? What can the teachers do as well? I think, it's one of the things that constantly comes up amongst discussions with teachers or parents, that, it needs to be addressed. And death of a loved one. COVID-19 is, impacting us, either indirectly, directly, and now it's getting closer and closer to home. It's either of someone, or it has happened in the family. And death is a big thing, adjusting that grief, that process, that understanding. And for young people, it can be even harder as well, because most of the time, the adults feel that kids are resilient, they'll adapt. Maybe they didn't know the person that well, or, it's a distant relative, but not knowing that, they held the person in such high esteem, and little is done, to actually help the kids go through their own grieving process. Everybody looks at what needs to be put back in place, we need to support the child if they've lost a parent, but nobody actually sits down with the kids and actually asks them, how are you feeling? What is going through your mind? What are the emotions when you wake up in the morning? What are you thinking about this person? Helping them process the grief is something that can assist them not to fall into depressive states. chronic illness. Unfortunately, some kids go through where they find out, they have to take medication for life. It's a big thing. It's a big change for anyone, even for an adult. So having to process that emotion and understanding that, I might not even live forever or for a long time. And so it impacts them highly mentally. And performing poorly at school. So, most of the times, one of the biggest fears for kids is that they are very critical of not meeting expectations of parents. You are sending them to a good school. You are constantly asking, why are you failing maths? Why are you not performing so well? Without, the extra support or getting them the necessary help for them to actually, perform much better. You find that, they are so self-critical that they feel that they shouldn't be around anymore. And it is such a sad thing that, as much as we want big things for the kids, we need to understand the pressures that we might be causing as the adults. Not feeling like they fit in. Teens, it's a big thing to fit in. I remember in my teen years, I always felt like an outsider. And luckily, I was more immersed in books than friends. So I think I found solace in the fact that, I can read books and, books don't talk back, because I was very shy. I couldn't talk in a crowd. I couldn't talk amongst a group. Literally, I'd start, freezing, that social anxiety. So I never felt I fit in. And for some people, because, our inner core strength is not the same. Some people, it hits them harder that I'm not fitting in. I'm not the popular girl. Nobody comes to me. Nobody invites me to parties. So what's the point for me to be living? Substance abuse. As I had indicated, teens are at a phase where they are experimenting, but not understanding that it can trigger certain mental health issues that can lead into depression and then therefore, suicidality. I don't know if we want to take questions while we are at this point, or should I continue till the end?
Perhaps to give you a break as well. I know you've been at it for 20 minutes already. Are there any questions? I see there is a comment from Trudy in terms of what else can be, what are the other triggers or symptoms. She says here, kids starting to say things like, I do not want to live anymore. Nobody will miss me. I just broken to my family. I'm a burden, to my family and friends. Maureen says they start hating themselves for all the inadequacies. Interesting. Any other comments? Perhaps you don't want to write the comment. You want to make the comment. You can unmute yourself and I can invite you to speak. What are some of the other triggers? This is a conversation. Let's have the conversation that you're aware of. Perhaps not explained in the same way that Busisiwe has explained it.
Thank you, Trudy, for the thumbs up.
Lovely.
Yes. And yeah, those who are aware of the Zoom reactions, please put a thumbs up, whether you agree 100%. There's lovely emojis that look like, the ones in WhatsApp. So I think it's one of the more interactive ways, because we are so far apart, but we are also together in this room. And I was doing a talk yesterday that, in a conference room, people will be nodding or will be clapping. So you have that sense of feeling that you are within people. So do use those Zoom reactions. I love it, Trudy.
Thanks, Busisiwe. I don't see any other responses. Oh, here's one. I'm concerned in our area we have one psychologist for 22 schools. How do we get more assistance for children who cannot afford private practitioners? Okay.
So I think that I'm going to be covering further on into the talk on, other resources that could be used, which SADC is one of them. So, yeah, and it is a big issue, psychologist numbers already in the country, in the public sector is a big issue. Psychiatrists, I'm not even going to talk about it. But yes, we do need more creative ideas of being proactive than, the reactive stance that we usually take.
Okay, there's Lungile. Lungile, you wanted to ask a question or make a comment?
Yes, please. So I think another one that I've seen a lot of lately is children whose parents are depressed or who have some mental issue, some mental challenges, and it filters down to the way they parent the kids. And then the kids just suffer from a whole lot of like anxiety, depression, because they got it from the way that they were being parented. Yeah, I think that one is like, yeah, I don't know how to deal with that one.
Yeah, it is a big issue. The environment plays a huge role. And, informing ourselves, equipping ourselves, and providing, the necessary information is where we can break that mindset that they have, that they are coming from that family. Having conversations is one of the most important things. I think I am going to be touching on that, on how do we speak to them? How do we, engage the kids, in opening up to us and understanding where everything is stemming from.
Trudy, you have your hand up.
Just to join the last speaker about families, we also, and I don't know if, but it's from my side, we know that depression and even anxiety, but especially depression it runs in families. It's not necessarily just learned behavior, but also inherited, like you inherit the risk for heart attacks or breast cancer from your family. So I think you will get to it. But one question when I do have an open discussion with adolescents is there anybody in your family that committed suicide or tried to commit suicide? And then you almost always hear something that there was somebody else that way back or many years back, a grandfather or whatever, that committed suicide. So yes, so it's both. It's the atmosphere in the house of helpless and hopelessness, but also the fact that there's this
disposition
for depression. Thank you for helping me.
Yeah, I know that word always gets me too. Yeah. So yeah, thank you guys, for the comments and everything. I see also there's another, what advice can teachers consider in order to identify these children before they become dangers to themselves and others? So you are already here. You are here in this room. You want to learn more about mental health. Already you are understanding what are the signs and symptoms. And that's the way, what we cannot identify something that we don't know. So you being here in this room today, Maureen, is exactly what is needed in order for us to be able to identify the changes, from the children, exactly what are they going through. So, even parents need to also understand that once they are educated, once they are informed, they are able to identify so that they are able to, be proactive in helping the kids before they become a danger to themselves. So thank you for that discussion. So I think I'm going to continue with the presentation so that I don't have to rush towards the end, because I think I do have quite a number of slides. So, now I wanted to touch on, the suicide language guide. So this is one of the things that SADC is very passionate about. How do we speak about these issues? How do we talk about them? Because we know that there's a big stigma around mental health, and what we say matters. And remember that, the youngsters nowadays are very informed. They are on social media, they are reading the conversations, they are listening to how people address this, and they're hearing how, certain things are condemned. So before we are able to speak to them and provide them the help, we also need to inform ourselves, avoid using, stigmatizing words towards them, because obviously that is going to make them feel like, what was the point of talking to the person? So we need to always stay informed. So, our suicide language guide is just, a guideline to say, how do we say, these things? So imagine having to indicate to somebody that somebody had died by suicide, and you say, it was a successful suicide. Already that to me, gives an impression that, oh, it was a desired outcome. Nobody wins when it comes to someone dying by suicide. So we need to be very careful about, our wording. Somebody committed suicide. I used to say it a lot in that way until, you get schooled and you get to understand, because, when you say commit, it sounds like, a crime was committed. And yeah, so this is a slide. I am going to be, sharing my presentation so you can familiarize yourself, with these wordings and how and not what to say. And one of the, important things that we need to address is, the myths around suicides. There's a lot of misconceptions about suicide, and I love going through this because it also reminds me where I come from. I came from a family that didn't understand mental health, so I also grew up not understanding mental health up until I had my own struggles and I had to sit with a psychologist and understood that having suicidal thoughts was not me hating me or seeking attention or, being selfish. So understanding, debunking these myths is something important, and it helps also to structure our conversations with the young people. So one, I'm going to go through a couple of them. I think there's 8 of them. So the first one is, people who talk about suicide won't do it. So people have the perception that, hey, they are just talking. It's just something that is passing. So in many cases, teens who have thoughts of suicide or who have died by suicide have given some kind of warning. As I indicated, 90% of cases of people who've died by suicide have said something to someone. So there'll be changes, through behavior or something that they've said to someone. As Trudy had written, in the comment section about, I don't want to live anymore. I don't want to be around. People will be better off without me. So there will be something that they say indicating that they have these thoughts and eventually, take up that action. And all suicide mentions or threats should be taken seriously. We cannot dismiss and say, they are always moody, they are going through things. It could be a way for them, to let you know that something is really wrong and that they need help. The second myth, talking about suicide makes people more likely to kill themselves. This is one of the biggest issues, when you approach people and say, hey, let's have a talk at the school about, suicide issues. And they're like, yo, you're going to cause the kids to want to kill themselves. So this is one of the biggest myths. Research has shown that talking about suicide with a young person does not cause them to have thoughts of suicide or killing themselves. But not talking about it can lead to thoughts of suicide turning into actions. Because there's no conversations, there's no normality, there's no understanding that, yes, these things happen, yes, these feelings you can have. So, talking about suicide and depression creates an opportunity for us to discuss and the thoughts that they are feeling and are going through, and they are always hidden. And most teens who are thinking about suicide are actually honest and are relieved when somebody actually asks direct questions about the thoughts that they are having. The third myth, people who attempt suicide are just trying to get attention. No. All threats or mentions of suicide should be taken seriously and, professional help provided if needed. Threatening suicide may be a call for help. Something must be wrong for somebody to start talking about wanting to take their life. It's not a matter of them trying to get attention as a teenager because suddenly they didn't get 1 or 2 or 3 years ago. So every mention should be taken seriously. Most suicide attempts occur without warning. As I had indicated, 90% of the time people would have mentioned something. There's physical or verbal, or they are giving away things. So we need to be quite attentive in the signs, in the things that they say and the signs that they give out. And the fact that, and the myth that only teens who are depressed attempt suicide. So this is not true. Yes, depression, it is the leading cause of suicide. But however, teens are still trying to process their feelings. They're trying to understand, what they are going through. And, they are not capacitated to actually process the way we process, the way we can take a step back. And, so them feeling low or severely sad for a short time or period could develop thoughts of them, wanting to, attempting suicide. And usually it is a combination of problems that lead to the teens thinking that suicide is the only way to end their problems. Another myth, only a certain type of person kills him or herself. So, that perception that, when I grew up, it was a matter of, what is depression in isiZulu? There is no depression in our culture. There is no mental health issues here, and there's still that notion around that, why are you taking all these things, from outside? Is it because you are educated? And that is not true. A lot of people, from the stats that we are seeing, from the calls that we're getting in the call center, it's a nationwide. It doesn't discriminate based on gender, race, upbringing, education level, ethnicity, socioeconomic factors. Yes, we understand that some factors do contribute to somebody being a higher risk for suicide and suicide attempts. But all people are susceptible to having these thoughts and feelings of suicide if faced with problems that they feel are too much and they cannot get out of. Suicide is not preventable. So some people think, when a person has decided, there's absolutely nothing we can do. It's what they wanted to do. So we believe this is not true. Nothing can, people think that nothing can be done. This is untrue. And, knowing how to identify all the warning signs and symptoms and getting the professional help is something that can actually prevent suicide. You guys, by being here, wanting to learn more, is exactly that, so that we are able to stop these things from happening. Suicide is preventable, not inevitable. People who die by suicide are selfish. So I also grew up hearing so much of this. And, when I had my own suicidal thoughts, I thought, am I being selfish? But no. I was going through a difficult time, and it was difficult to process everything all at once. And all I needed was help. And I was very fortunate to get the help. So typically people do not die by suicide because they do not want, they do not want to live anymore. People die by suicide because they want to end the suffering and pain. These individuals are suffering so deeply that they feel helpless and hopeless. Individuals who experience suicidal ideation do not do so by choice. So imagine, we have a survival instinct. We want to survive, we want to achieve the best. So there is no way that you wake up the next morning and literally pick suicide and say, this is what I'm going to do. It's exactly how, nobody picks diabetes or any other issue or chronic illness. Nobody wakes up to pick up these things and say, I'm going to be selfish. I'm going to choose, being a sickly person so that I spend so much money on medication. Nobody does that. It's because people are going through difficult issues or serious mental health issues that they consider suicide. So, now that we know how to identify the warning signs, be it how they talk, what they are doing, what they are posting online. And it's something that we need to be very aware of. And this is particularly important for parents. Do you know what your child is posting online? Do you know what Google searches are they doing? Once they start thinking about something, information is in their fingertips, and that's where they go first. So, it's one of those things where we are like, how do you know? Do you know what's happening? Do you know what they are posting? And sometimes some of the calls that we get, you know, from the younger people who are like, my friend, I think my friend is going through something. We ask, what did you see? And they're like, they've posted maybe a news. So it's been constant. So, you know, social media, where they are putting the information, what are they drawing? You know, what are they saying? So we've already touched on that. And, you know, saying things, I wish I wasn't here. Everybody would be better off if I was dead. And we've also touched on the behavior, you know, the changing in their moods and their eating habits and the loss of interest in, you know, family or isolating themselves. So we've identified, even if you see one sign, that's what we say, don't wait, don't leave it, talk, listen, and connect. So how do we talk, listen, and connect with the young ones? So how do we talk to someone who may be thinking about suicide? You know, it is one of the, you know, daunting, I think, conversations, especially when you've never been in a place of having to have these conversations. We believe that it is safer to ask than not asking at all. Yes, you've noticed one symptom, you know, indicating to them, I'm really worried about you and I want to help you. You know, it opens up a door for conversations. Saying, I've noticed you have been very down lately. Is it now a good time to chat? Or, you know, do you want to chat later? I've noticed you haven't been yourself. So they are aware that, you know, somebody's actually seeing me as a person. Somebody's noticing that I'm not okay. You know, asking them to talk to you. You know, remembering that their feelings matter, and these feelings are very, very scary. And, you know, coming from a place of not judging, because, you know, sometimes, yes, we have our ideas that they might be acting out, but you cannot come from that place if you actually want to help a teen who's feeling suicidal. You know, listening, ask questions and try to understand, because usually from what they are feeling, there's an underlying source. Something must have happened for them to feel that the way that they are feeling. You know, some of them may not even understand, because this is a biological, you know, effect for some where they develop depression. So them saying that they don't understand doesn't mean their feelings are not true. So it could be a biological effect. You know, that is happening with them. So understanding when they say, I don't know, is maybe a sign of, let's seek, you know, further professional help who can do the necessary assessments and tests so that, you know, we can figure out why are they feeling the way they are feeling. You know, asking them directly if they have any thoughts of plans of suicide. So we understand how of a higher risk are they at that point, you know, because for somebody who's like, I've never thought about it, do we understand that, okay, they haven't gotten to that highest risk of having a plan, you know, having details and everything. So we know where the intervention should lie. And, you know, now that, you know, what help do you provide for somebody who's feeling suicidal? You know, don't leave the person alone, you know, offer to get help together. Yes, they'll share their feelings, but leaving them to figure it out on their own. This even works well for adults, you know, saying, let's get help together. Let's figure it out together so that we can deal with what you are going through is a very powerful thing. Thank them for opening up and telling you how they are really feeling. You know, it's a moment where they are so vulnerable with you. You know, they are opening up a space where, you know, they're saying, I need help. So, you know, thanking them and acknowledging that you see what they're going through and you want to help them is a big thing. Speaking to an adult who they might trust, a parent or teacher that you trust, you know, or is, you know, equipped, knows the information that you trust, can get help ASAP, especially for people who are highly suicidal or at high risk. Obviously, you know, getting mental health professional is a big one, especially if there needs to be treatment that they need to go through. Calling the suicide helpline, you know, SADC is there to give suggestions and resources. You know, we are happy to take you through the information, you know, and help you identify or speak to the learner, how to hold the conversation. the one thing that we want you to know is, remember, you are not alone in this. You don't have to fix the problem right then and there alone. There is support, there is help and support. And once we know where to go and we have an idea, a mind map in our heads, it helps. It's much easier for you to even approach those who need the help. If a person has tried to, hurt themselves or take their own life, please get them to the nearest hospital urgently. We know it's one of the things they're like, no, they didn't cut deep and what, but the sense that they are already attempting is a huge, huge indicator that these people need a serious professional intervention. So yes, in summary, how do we help? Let's follow these steps. We ask, we listen, and then we connect with the resources. So this is another, just a highlight of when someone is thinking about suicide, what are the steps to take? So it's literally touching on what I've been talking about now. But, one of the things that I'd like to, highlight, is, managing your hesitations. We tend to doubt ourselves whether we are the people who are able to help, because we feel, yes, we don't know much, but it is better to ask and be mistaken than not to say anything. So so this is available. I'm going to be sharing it with you guys. So understanding what you can do and how to do it is very important. So when I speak about connecting, there's various areas that I've already touched on. There's professionals that can assist. There are teachers or counselors, the schools that are fortunate to have counselors. There are also, social workers that can be reached out to who work in the department. There's a slide, I think later on, I'll also show you how to put, like an emergency contact list for the school where it can be easily accessible and where you have the resources that you can connect to help. So these are the SADC helplines, and these are, some of our 24-hour helplines where you can reach out to and speak to a counselor if needing any assistance. We are also on social media, on Facebook, on Twitter, and we are always posting relevant information. Our website has so much resources, toolkits around, teen suicide. We have various videos that you can watch. As I had indicated, the more we inform ourselves, the more we are equipped with information, the more we can tackle all of these things. And yeah, in February, March, we had a Teen Suicide Prevention Week, teachers and parents webinar. It was recorded, it's available on YouTube. There are links there. And most of this information that I'm presenting today comes, from all those webinars. So these are also further on resources that you can go on to learn about, mental health issues. There's apps as well that, also the kids can use, calming them, how to learn how to meditate if they are feeling, agitated, if they are feeling depressed. So there's also information for them. And I know that, it's COVID and a lot of our school talks are halted, especially the ones face-to-face. But if there's a school that wants to, host a teachers talk, it be a group of teachers unpacking a certain topic, you are welcome to reach to our admin manager, Lynn. She usually is the one organizing school talks. There's also Cassie Chambers, our operations director. So they can be reached on those emails, to request more information, what can be done for the school. And we are always happy to brainstorm and see how we can assist. So I don't know if there's any questions before I move on to, the tips for teachers that we've put together. As much as we have summarized, it's nice to summarize at the end, just to indicate what can the teachers do, in order to assist learners. Any questions? Or must I continue?
Well, let's give you another break, a short break, before we get into any longer conversations. Are there any comments that people want to make or questions? Alton, you have your hand up. Thanks, Alton.
Thank you, Salvan. Just a quick question. I heard somebody talking earlier about anxiety and depression being hereditary, and it was interesting because there's a relatively good friend of mine who is struggling with depression for quite a long time, and what I've seen with her children, the children are struggling with depression. There's obviously it has an impact on the relationship between mom and dad. And the depression has manifested in such a way in the children that one of the children was struggling with walking. And what they've said, they've done tests and everything. They said all of these things that the children are struggling with are linked to anxiety. And I did not, I just thought it might have been the environment. And I never thought of it being something that could be hereditary. So I would love to just get your opinion about that, Busisiwe, or anyone else's for that matter.
It was Trudy who raised this, and it is such an important thing. There's physical symptoms to some of the mental health conditions that people experience, and everybody expects it to be emotional. But with anxiety, it's one of the things that there's physical things that can happen. And with kids, and you're saying struggling to walk, which is something that the child was able to do. And it's usually difficult to pick up because nobody knows that it can manifest itself physically. And it's one of the things that, we are getting to learn more about, that, in the symptoms, it's not only that feeling of being flustered or feeling hot or sweating and whatnot. Stomach issues, some people literally will have runny tummy for days thinking that they have food poisoning, but literally it's anxiety. And, it's such an important thing that, knowing the history of the family, and if the family is aware that they've been through this, it's important to look out for it in their kids. And I think, when you get to learn about how it's hereditary, everybody who's been diagnosed, thinking that they're suffering from depression, they start thinking, oh no, they link it back. My grandmother was depressed. My mother, I once saw my mother, going through so much, not getting out of bed for weeks on end, but, they never got the necessary help. Or yes, somebody in the family died by suicide already, but everybody thought they were selfish at that time. Nobody understood mental illness, but no, it's literally something that runs in the family, just like cancer.
Thank you so much for those insights. Yvonne has a hand up. Yvonne, over to you. Yvonne, you can unmute. Yvonne, your hand is up. Okay, she's not able to speak. You can go ahead, Busisiwe.
Okay. Yes, it's important, that we empower the people that, are always around the children. So as I had mentioned, one of the biggest things to understand is know the warning signs, which we have gone through. And knowing the warning signs is a key factor in being able to, take up that step and saying, what, somebody needs help. And taking every threat or mention seriously. We cannot stress that enough. We feel it'd rather be a false alarm than it being, taken lightly and, losing a child to suicide. You know, as I was speaking, easy access to a list of resources or contact details. I have a slide where it's a diagram. You know, I think it's one of the powerful things that every school should have in the classroom, in the staff room, even in a teacher's file, where you know who to get hold of if you are noticing something like this. And understanding that you are not a counselor, you are not a therapist. You know, your role is to facilitate the help. So being able to transfer on the responsibility. You know, we definitely, you know, always want to hold kids and sort out their problems, but it is a process when it comes to mental health. Understanding that, you know what, I might need to notify another person to assist, to intervene, refer to the next resource, notifying the parents, you know, the people who are guardians of this child, who are responsible for this child. As much as, you know, in my conversations with the young people, when you ask them, would you want your parent to know? No, most of the time they don't want, but they would have an alternative of an adult that they trust, that can, you know, even break the news to their parent in a kinder manner, because you do need the parent for the help. You know, accessing resources available, the Department of Basic Education coordinators. We know that they are difficult people to get hold of, but, you know, it is something that, you know, we need to bring them to the party and say, but we need processes and protocols in order, you know, to help our kids. And it's something, you know, I think it's something that definitely needs to be addressed. The policy people, it needs to be transparent. Where do we go when we need help? We are so reactive to everything, and that it makes it difficult. And that's why most people are like, I won't even know where to send the child. So, you know, little by little, we are trying to break those barriers so that we know who are the people that need to be contacted for help. You know, calling SADC for resources, you know, afterwards, checking in with the learner. It makes them feel important. It makes them feel that they are cared for. Or if there's a school counselor, checking progress with the school counselor, because you are the first contact with the student, you know, so knowing what they're going through, what progress are they making, you know, even commending them and say, you know, I'm proud of you for going to the counselor. How is it going? Is it working for you? You know, that touching base makes them feel that, you know, somebody does care for them. You know, a follow-up on an action plan or treatment plan that you just have an idea of. You don't have to take control of it, but just having an idea so that when you do have a conversation with the student, you are able to find out where are they in their plan. So another, you know, big tip is to develop a school support team. You know, I'm so happy that, you know, there are teachers here in the room, which means to me, it's people who want to help, they want to be equipped, they want to understand what is going on. So developing, you know, a group of you who are a support team, where you identify a group of teachers who can assist in an emergency, you know, making sure the teacher and learner will know who is part of this team, so that in case of a crisis, we know who exactly to reach out to. It's not always a case of who do we call, who would be the best person. So everybody knows and it understands who is the person, the first point of contact, maybe who's supposed to chat to the learner, like you have a teacher buddy system. Not everybody should be doing everything. So we understand who's good with speaking to the learner. And I remember, you know, during the school talks, we'd ask, you know, the kids, sometimes some of them, you know, they'd be triggered by the conversation. So speaking to them individually, and most of them indicated that they had a teacher that they trusted. And so it indicated that, you know, there's that teacher who's really good with speaking to the learners. So having that teacher to say, okay, let's speak to the learner, chat to the learner, unpack the issue so that we see where they need help. You know, someone to notify the school support team, the school counselor, head of department, or the parent or district coordinator. Someone to action an emergency. You know, maybe there's an ambulance needed, or we need to take a student to the clinic. So this is the emergency contact list I was speaking about, which would be, you know, such a beautiful thing if, you know, every school had it in their staff room, if teachers had it in their file. So you have, you know, like a list of helplines. Where do we call to find the information? We are confused, you know, there's child abuse issues. The child has opened up to me. Where do we go? Childline is available. You know, child has threatened suicide, or they've attempted, they were found. Who do you speak to? SADC. You know, so those resources are quite important. Having a district coordinator that, you know, can be contacted, who's available and able to organize resources if there's an emergency for the school. You know, a nearest pharmacy, you know, social worker's name, the nearest clinic in case, you know, a child is sick, so that, you know, everything is within reach. You know, it's not only about suicide or mental health, but everything. It encompasses everything. And it's good to know that, you know what, I have a place where I can look up and get the information very quickly without having to call this person. This person tells me to call that other person. So I think this is one of the beautiful things that schools could have. One of the, you know, biggest thing that I'm always advocating for, you know, we want to be there for the kids. We want to solve so many problems. That's why you took your afternoon to come and listen to this talk, equip yourself. And it is a beautiful thing. You are also putting in your own oxygen mask first, because the more you are resourced, the more you feel confident in helping others. But I also want you to put on your own mask, oxygen mask for you, because, you know, you cannot pour for an empty cup. You know, we are going through so much. And, you know, this helps us avoid things like burnout or compassion fatigue, which I think so many people have been through it because of COVID. There's so many things that are changing, that are happening. We have to support our families. We have to support the students. We have to support ourselves. So, you know, having to take time out for ourselves is something that is quite important. And, you know, there's various ways that, you know, you can do this. And as I had said previously, I was running a lot, but currently I'm very comfortable with literally sinking into the couch, having snacks beside me and Netflixing. Literally for that couple of minutes, switch off my phone, because we are on a lot of WhatsApp groups now because working from home. So sometimes the boundaries, you know, are not there anymore. So in order for us to understand that, you know, I need time for myself, having a you moment of just looking out, you know, for yourself is very important. So these are some of the tips that one can look into in order for you to look after yourselves, while we try to look after, you know, this growing generation as well. So these are other ideas on what one can do. And yeah, so please, let's look after ourselves while we try to look after everybody. And I think this is the end of my presentation.